Hello, everybody. You are listening to The Local Lens, the podcast from the Powell County Health Department and Kentucky Rio, where we go inside our community's experience with the drug epidemic. We are coming to you from Stanton, Kentucky, a small town nestled at the foothills of Appalachia. And if you know much about Stanton and this region, then you will recognize that we do not have the world's greatest economic standing. We are not just bustling with new job opportunities. Options are pretty limited here, as they are in all kinds of places across the state and country, and even the world. It causes a lot of problems for a lot of people. So in this episode, we are going to be looking at what one specific organization is doing to help fight that and change the tide for some people in Eastern Kentucky. And we have actually met this organization before. This is the organization that works with companies like App Harvest to bring second chance employment to bigger companies. So some of this might be a little familiar, but we're going to dig in all the way. Let's go on and start the interview though. I'm your host, Nate Brooks, and you're listening to The Local Lens. These are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do. We're here mainly to talk about the SITE program, which stands for
Strategic Initiative for Transformational Employment.
Okay, sounds good. And in the room we have with us
Tessa Turner. I am the Special Populations Project Manager here with Eastern Kentucky Concentrated Employment Program.
And I'm Barbara Gay. I'm Assistant Manager for the Special Populations Project Program.
And I am Brittany Kegley, and I am a Job Entry and Retention Support Specialist covering the Tenco area, as well as the Lead Success Coach for the Kentucky Employer Resource Network.
SITE is a program from EKCEP.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And EKCEP is Eastern Kentucky Concentrated Employment Program.
Okay.
We are the Workforce Investment Board that covers the 23 counties here in Eastern Kentucky.
So EKCEP is responsible for helping find employment solutions for counties in the area from Powell County to Ashland down to Knox County and Louisa. So it's a pretty good size region that they are responsible for helping. Now the SITE program that we will be focusing on specifically is focused on helping people in recovery, but EKCEP as a whole is just responsible for all kinds of employment. So we're going to start this episode by getting an understanding of EKCEP and what the challenges they face are as an entire organization. And later on, we'll get more specifically into what this has to do with people in recovery. As briefly as you can put it, what are the challenges like in this line of work?
We're workforce. Of course, we're the Workforce Investment Board, and there are a lot of challenges with workforce, especially in Eastern Kentucky. Even though EKCEP does great work, there's still not huge availability of jobs, or at least sustaining wage jobs. So EKCEP as a whole works very hard on trying to bring in new business, trying to bring in new industry. We work with employers. What are their needs? How can we help them retain and maintain their workforce? We do that's our primary goal with EKCEP is building that workforce, working with those employers, working with partner agencies. But then they also have a lot of special projects within that, but it's all workforce based. Like the SITE program that we're going to talk about today, our Strategic Initiative for Transformational Employment, it is all about helping individuals in recovery re-enter the workforce or to be able to stay in the workforce. So everything we do, even though there may be special populations that we work with or special organizations or anything like that, it's still all workforce based for us. It's getting people in those jobs to help maintain not only themselves but their community.
What is the relationship between EKCEP and just the coal industry?
Well, of course, coal was a major workforce incentive here in Eastern Kentucky. That we were probably some of the highest paid. A lot of our counties, had some of the highest paid I wouldn't say non-skilled, but non-credentialed, workers probably in the nation. And then when, the coal industry started, declining, then of course the things that you imagine would happen. And that's, people started leaving here to get jobs, better jobs other places. People had to take jobs. They didn't make as much money, so it affected the community, economically as well. Businesses had to close, so it's been a big, it's been a big downturn. And EKCEP has done a lot of really good things. Like we have Dash Core, which is it's a Canadian company, aluminum factory that moved here to Perry County. You have Powell Valley there in Powell County. There's a lot of industry that's really growing, and that's what we try to do. But they also have thought outside the box a lot. We have Teleworks USA is a program that falls under EKCEP as well, which is a remote work from home opportunities for people. And there are hundreds and hundreds of companies that fall under that Teleworks USA model that people have the opportunity to to do the things that they like to do. There's a lot of variety of jobs. There's everything from data entry to sales to there's banking. I mean, it's just tremendous. Healthcare. Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that fall under that, and that's been a really big growing factor, I feel like, for us, and Teleworks has taken off really well here.
Yeah, because when you look at what the benefits of life in Eastern Kentucky are, it's getting to be in a beautiful area, actually, and getting to be pretty secluded from the rest of the noise that a lot of our country has to offer. And so getting to work remotely just goes hand in hand with the benefits of being here anyways. Right?
Absolutely. And we've made a lot of strides as far as our internet connections and having the availability to do that. There's still some struggles in some counties, but a lot of like Lee County and Owsley, a lot of those counties have the great fiber optic, and so they've been able to really help people get into really good jobs. I mean, they work with like Apple and U-Haul and so names that people have heard, and people are able to get those jobs, and they're able to work from home, and they're able to stay here, which is our goal. I'm from here, born and raised. My parents are both educated, retired school teachers. I'm educated as well, and it's our choice, to be here. There's something about the mountains, in my opinion, that I've lived in Frankfurt, I've lived in Lexington, I've visited a lot of places. I've been to France and Switzerland, so I'm gonna put that little plug in there. And there's just something about Eastern Kentucky that it's like you have this connection, and I'm very proud of where I'm from. There are we learn to be very resilient here, I feel like. And absolutely. I feel like people lose a lot, and I feel like our kids and grandkids lose a lot when they have to move away, or they feel that there's they can't make a life here for themselves, because that's the big thing. And that's one thing that EKCEP works really hard on trying to do, is try to get that stronghold so that people have the opportunity to stay. Because we want to keep our workforce here. We want to keep all workforce. We personally work with special populations, but we want to keep all workforce, going here in Eastern Kentucky, and that's EKCEP's primary goal.
So what are some of the challenges facing workers in Eastern Kentucky? Now, we get into some stuff that is not necessarily concrete. It's pretty abstract, but it all goes together to affect the mood of what it's like to live and work in this region.
I feel like we're looked at as it's Eastern Kentucky, and I want to use do we want to use the old barefoot and pregnant kind of, uneducated hillbillies, kind of no teeth, which is depicted everywhere. You look at movies, if they shoot a clip in Eastern Kentucky, they'll drive by $1 million home and show you a clip of a trailer, with a satellite dish. I mean, that's happened for years. So I think there's kind of a stigma, not just about recovery, but about Eastern Kentucky in general already. And I think sometimes we don't have the voice to really show people what we truly have to offer here. My dad is one of 9 kids, and all 7 of those 9 kids have college degrees. They were raised on a farm here in Eastern Kentucky. And when I say farm, I don't mean a nice flat level farm where you're going to ride a tractor. I mean, the side of the hill has benches, okay? And, and they kind of use those benches to plant corn or whatever. His mom and dad never worked a public job. They raised their family just by what they could farm and what they could raise and things like that. So, my dad tries to keep that alive. So we still, in our family, we go to the barn and gather eggs in the morning. My dad does. We still kill hogs. We make our own sausage. We do a lot. And, and not because we have to, but because it's an Appalachian tradition that I think my dad just always grew up with, and he wanted to keep alive. But I think and he made a comment, and I said all that to get to this. He made a comment once, though. He said, when something happens in the world, And he said, most places are really, really, really going to struggle. He said it's going to be your places like Eastern Kentucky and your rural areas where people have really had to dig and make it themselves that are going to survive because they have that resilience and they know how to do that. And I think we're overlooked a lot. I think they don't see the potential of the people in Eastern Kentucky. I think we don't always have the right voices in local government, state government, federal government to give us the things that we need to really be as successful as we can be. But I think a lot of people are making a lot of strides, in that, and EKCEP is one of those.
Well, okay, let's go and get into site then, because you were saying some very good notes on this region of the state and this region of the country is overlooked. And then just to pin that even further, there is a group of people in this area especially that are always getting overlooked. And anybody in recovery, anybody struggling with addiction currently, that's a group of people that have tended to get swept under rugs for as long as I know of, at least. So what's site doing to address this?
Well, I'm going to start. I don't want to do all the talking today, so I'm going to start a little bit and just introduce SITE and then let these girls, I'm going to let Barb kind of take over. SITE is a grant-funded program that EKCEP is managing, and it is funded by CORE, the Kentucky Opioid Response Effort, and the Department of Justice, as well as the Department of Corrections. So we get monies from them that provide us to be able to provide staff. We have 19 staff across the state that work with individuals in recovery with the sole purpose of working with that individual to meet them where they are, to develop a career, to do assessments, the things that we need to do to get to know them, but then to develop a career plan with that person and help them not just get a job. I really try to avoid the word job, because if I say job, you see one picture in your mind. And if I say career, you see another picture in your mind. And I don't care who you are, it is what it is. It looks completely different to you in your mind. So what we want to do is we develop a career plan for each of these individuals. Where are they going to be successful? Because it's different for all of us. I fell into my career plan on accident. I had done something else for 13 and a half years, and I accidentally fell into where I really was meant to be, So everybody has a place. And it's just a matter of finding out, what is that place that they're going to be successful and that they're going to be a success for their employer. And then another big thing about what we do is it's two-sided. It's not just about meeting that person and meeting their needs. It's about knowing your employers in that area. So my staff they're tasked with a tough job because they have to know their employers, not just that they're there, but what kind of jobs do they hire for? What's the credentials for all these different types of jobs? What kind of personality types work in this environment? Because they all don't work. We all don't work in the same way in the same place. Who's been successful for you? And it's a matter of sitting down with an employer and saying, hey, what types of people are successful for you? Who doesn't tend to work? We kind of try to make sure that it meets them psychologically, personally, like with their interest levels. If they have triggers, we try to avoid those. If there's coping mechanisms, we try to make sure they have those. We try to make sure they have natural supports. So it's really a matter of combining. It's a matter of knowing the employer, knowing the place of employment, and knowing what natural supports are going to be there for that individual. And then it's about knowing that individual. I refrain from using the word intimately because that gives connotations that I don't mean, but to know that person and for them to be open enough with us to really say, hey, this is where I this is where I bloom. This is where I flourish. This is when I really get anxious. Because the last thing we want to do is take someone in recovery, put them in a job that they can't handle, to then maybe further hinder their recovery in general, and then also to give an employer someone who's not the right fit for them, because then that gives a bad taste for anyone. Well, I hired this person in recovery, they didn't work out, so I don't want to hire those people anymore. So we actually have I have a strong staff across the state, and I'm very proud of each and every one of them, but they're tasked with a very if you look at it the way that I do, it's like working a puzzle. It's
That's what I was about to say.
You have to be able to, and then you have to know your partners, because we can't do it alone. With what we need to do, there's no way we are going to be able to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So, because these people, once we find them a job, there are barriers for them to go. If they've been in recovery, if they've been in active addiction for 15 years and they've been in treatment for a year and a half or 60 days or 90 days or 30 days, and we get them a job tomorrow, they probably don't have the money to get gas to get back and forth. They may not have a car. They may not have their license. They may not have their birth certificate. So there's all these obstacles that you're kind of trying to maneuver through while you're doing a career plan to figure out where's the best place for them to be ultimately.
And also during that time, it's still expensive to be alive during that time.
Absolutely.
And it takes time for you all to do a good job with what you're doing, to make sure you're finding good fits. How are these people being supported while they're in this in-between period?
And I was just going to say, and I'm going to hand that off to Barb, because we're very fortunate in that part of our grant funding allows for what we call support services.
Wonderful. Okay,
so
cool.
I'm going to let Barb talk about support services and also about the partnership. So because there's Goodwill and there's the career centers and there's just so many people. There's the Fletcher Group. There's FAHI. There's a lot of people out there. And again, with those acronyms, I'm sorry.
No, FAHI. My brother works for FAHI.
There you go. So you know that one. And the Fletcher Group.
Yeah,
so we work really closely with them. So again, to tie up what I was going to say, my people are tasked with getting to know an individual, getting to know their area and all the partner agencies who are doing similar work in their area, getting to know all the employers in their area, finding all the resources that they can in their area, and then tying all that up in one big, kind of package individually for every person that we work with. And we are currently right now averaging about 400 new enrollments a month.
Wow.
Across the state. And with that, I'm handing off to Miss Barb, who, like she said, is the assistant project manager, and she works really closely with support services as well as all of our reporting. So she'll be able to give you some great numbers as well, I'm sure.
All right.
Well,
great.
First I want to ask you if Gene is your brother.
No, John.
John, don't know him.
Yeah.
I know Gene from FAHI. I've worked with him several times.
I'll ask John if he knows Gene.
Gene Deathridge. But anyway, with our support services, it allows us to provide some things for clients that they may be lacking. Maybe they need a gas card to get them started, or a couple of gas cards until they get a paycheck. Maybe they don't have clothes to wear. They can't afford to buy uniforms, and many times they don't have family or friends that they can rely on. Maybe they can't pay their electric bill, or they don't have the money for their deposit or first month's rent. So we assess each client it's a case-by-case basis. So what one person needs, it's not like the same for everybody, and we look at them individually. But we get to know our partners. Each person on this site team, you have to do, not only do you do some case management, but you're kind of like business services, and you got to know all your community partners and all your employers so that you can help that client not only find the right job, but the right partner agency. If you can't help them, if it's a service that you can't provide, who can? Where can they get a food box if they need it? Where can they get clothes? Is there a local church or community center? So we rely very heavily on our partners for those kinds of things.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. And then about how long would it, this differs across each person, I'm sure, but about how long does it take before or between the times that like you all are just meeting somebody to when they are pretty dependably running on their own?
Wow.
That's a case-by-case basis, because every individual that we do come across, they're not going to be to the same point in their recovery or in their living situation. And you have to take every bit of that into account, because as Tessa was saying, you do not want to put someone in a situation where it would hinder them rather than help them.
Well, is it closer to like 1 month time or closer to 6 months? Generally.
I've had individuals come to me and speak with them on a weekly basis. And typically, somewhere between, some will go to work within that week.
Okay.
Some will go to work within a 3-week period. Some need assistance getting enrolled into soft skill training and need resume building. So then we ask our partners to help them with different assessments, help them with resume buildings. Like the Career Center is amazing with helping individuals, getting them in the same day.
Yeah.
And getting them set down so they can build that resume. That way they have it on hand as soon as they are ready to start applying to places.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And then it's just a long process to get through the hiring process itself. And I know several companies at least withhold the first paycheck until the second one comes, so that just adds on to the time needed for that transition to actually be effective. Do any of the companies you all work with work around that for any of the employees that you're getting in there, or?
I've not had that up
Okay.
to this point where they would make exceptions and do payroll earlier.
Okay.
But that is where our site services would definitely come into play to help be that supplemental source until they did receive their first paycheck, to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah.
So they would not be going without. And we also utilize our outside resources, community food banks if necessary. If they needed government assistance, we have pathways to help get them enrolled into that also.
Okay. Nice.
And a lot of times the first thing I would hear was, listen, I just got to have a job. I got to have a job. My, rent's due, or, my car's broke down. I just got to have a job. And when I try to talk about career with someone who's just got to have a job, they're not hearing me. Because they've got to worry about if they're going to have food tomorrow, or if they're going to have a roof over their head, or if they're going to be able to feed their kid, so they don't really want to hear my, let's talk about a career, talk. So sometimes we do those maintenance positions, like when they say, hey, I've got to have this, then we'll say, well, listen, let's look at, this is not where we want to see you. We want you to have larger goals, but sometimes those conversations have to come later, because I'm going to be honest with you, I felt like a lot of my clients just felt like they didn't have the right anymore to have a dream. You know what I mean? That like dreaming about a career was kind of something that they really just, I just got to have a job. I've always worked in food service. Can you just get me a job in food service? And they didn't really want to hear, but how about, where are you really happy? Where are you going to want to go to every day? Where are you going to, and I think that's the great thing about our program is, so we do all those things. So if they have to have that immediate, we help them find that immediate. But we don't stop there. Our program's not, okay, we got your job. Good job. Yeah. It's okay that we've got this job, so what are we making? Okay, let's talk about a budget. So how are we going to build a budget with this job? So okay. What you got coming in, and what's going to have to go out? Or is this where you're happy now? And then after they've done it they're like, well, I don't know if I can really make it on it. So, so what do you think, what can we do to get you to where you're sustainable? Because that's our goal. It's not just about a job or a career it's about how can they sustain? How can they sustain themselves? How can they sustain their families?
It's about how to make a good life.
If they cannot sustain, what's going to happen?
And you're giving them the tools and resources to empower them. Just because, if they're 15 years with a substance use disorder, they don't, most people that I talk to, they're like, I'm not good enough for this.
They feel that way.
And they feel like, honestly, they do not have the confidence that, hey, I can be this. And that's what, that sounds like what you guys are trying to do is amazing, and by empowering.
And we get to see that. I think the most, and I'll get emotional. I think the most amazing thing to me is I tell my staff we have bi-weekly site calls because they're across the state. I have a total of 26 staff. With all the programs, and they're across the state, so we have bi-weekly site calls, which are Zoom meetings, and we update and talk, and everybody plan for the future. And I think I tell them on every single call, how amazing is it that you get to make a difference in somebody's life every single day and get paid to do it? Talk about a career plan.
Yeah.
Talk about a career plan. And that's a big thing, and I think sometimes it takes our clients a little while to realize that they can have that too, and we often have to stop and let them, like I said, we get that maintenance job, and then we do the financial side of it. Can you make it with this? Do they want to go back to school? Can we refer them to Office of Vocational Rehabilitation or the Career Center to pay for a training? Where do they want to be? Like one example, I want to give an example of one of my stories, and I want each of these girls to give one, because this is what I want people, when they hear at the site. Strategic Initiative for Transformational Employment, this is what I want them to hear. I had a young man that was referred to me from drug court, okay, 20s, mid-20s. He had tried going to college a little bit. He'd sign up, he wouldn't go, so I ended up owing a bunch of money to the college, so he couldn't really go back to school. Now that he was trying to get on the right track, right, couldn't really go back to school, had no job. Of course, he wasn't married, didn't have any kids, it was just him. And, and he's like, drug courts, I have to have a job. And I was like, well, I understand that. And if you have to have one, at least let's find one that, that we can build on. Mm-hmm. What can we build on? What can we start getting you some experience that you might want? He said, well, I've always wanted to be a lineman. That's just, he said, I said, well, have you thought, and I mentioned, have you thought about going back to school? Because drug court will often negate that work obligation for education as well, if they're willing to go back to school. He said, can't go back to school. I owe this much, and, they won't let me back in. And I said, okay. I said, well, have you thought about it? I said, what about if we get you a job then with a company that does that type of work, mm-hmm. And a non-skilled, and that way you can see if you're really going to like it, and maybe, he said, oh, that'd be amazing. So then I go to a local, employer, and I say, hey, I got this young man, this is his age, this is what he wants to do, this is kind of his career goal, what would you guys think about hiring him? And they're like, hey, we could hire him as a groundsman. We can train him to climb. We can do those, mm-hmm. He would make this much. Then as he gained skills, he'd make more. And then I said, but he's in drug court. They're like, oh, well, he won't, because drug court has a lot of obligations. Mm-hmm. So they often, it kind of fixes their work schedule. I don't know if you guys are real familiar with that. Yeah. So I said, would you be willing to talk to the judge? So this is what I did. So I got drug court at the table, I got the employer at the table, I got the client at the table, and myself at the table. And we all sit and said, what can we do? The judge says, well, if you guys are willing to give him a job, we'll make these accommodations. We'll do all of his drug testing on Fridays. He'll be off on Fridays. He'll work 410s, whatever. So, and then Hurley said, well, if you guys will do that, then we'll keep him local. Mm-hmm. For the first, 6 months. We won't try, and we'll see how he does. Just like, okay, if he does good in 6 months, then we'll maybe start letting him travel. So the young man starts to work for the company. Everything goes great. 6 months, they start letting him travel. They're letting him go out of state to do jobs. He gets a raise. They're doing everything. Now that young man is a foreman at that company. He has 2 trucks and 12 men that work under him. Wow. So basically, I get emails and texts all the time saying, wow, I wanted to be a lineman. I never dreamed that I would ever be in a position of being someone's boss. Yeah. So that's a perfect example of how SITE works. It's basically meeting that person where they are, negating in all the features, mm-hmm. what it would take to put something together for that person and help them navigate it. Yeah. To get them to where they want to be and to where they're happy. Yeah. So that's an example that I have, one-on-one with a client that was able to do that. And that's when people think about SITE, that's why I don't want them to know, well, yeah, they provide support services, because we do. We can buy people gas cards. We can help people fix their car. We can do those things. But those things are to help that person build that career, to make sure that they stay in the workforce. We're not just, you can come and sign up. Yeah. For these services type program. And that's what I want people to understand. And I would like for these ladies to share a situation on how the program has worked with them.
Let's do it.
I have one client I can think of. She has just come so far. I met a young lady in drug court, probably my 3rd month on this job. She was, I think, maybe the 2nd client I'd ever signed up. So she had not had a job in a really long time. She had been in jail. She'd had to move back home with her family. Didn't have custody of her kids, whatnot. So she had given up on finding a job. So we were able to find her a job, a maintenance job, as Tessa would say, at a small, like a little gas station grocery store. And she worked 3rd shift, and she hated it. But she stuck with it because she had to have some money to help pay her bills, and drug court required that she worked. So as time passed, she built some confidence and started, saying, I think I want something more. So we started looking for other jobs, and we started looking at maybe peer support training, because she had got to where she was clean for a year. So she got that peer support training, and she moved on to a job with Sober Living Home in Laurel County. And she started referring to our job entry and retention support specialist that covered the Cumberlands area. Then she was able to move up into a job with KRCC. Mountain Comp. So she gets on with Mountain Comp, and she's referring folks back to the SITE program from that area.
Nice.
Now she's with KRCC, and she's referring even more people. And she's just about done with her bachelor's degree, and she's going to go on. And I just looked 3 years later, we're just still seeing her grow and refer people back to us, and we're able to just keep it moving and help more.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
So one of my success stories, whenever I had met him, was whenever I first came on as a job entry retention support specialist and a success coach. And when I met him, he was living in a camper with no electric. He technically homeless. He had no running water. He had nothing against the elements. And upon working with him, he was already employed. And working with him and working with the employer, he had a unique skill set that kind of wasn't recognized within the company. He was a volunteer firefighter from previous experiences. Then, every time there was an accident on site at his employer, he was the first one there. Over and over again, the employer recognized this special skill set that he had, and they created a special position with him within that company. And he had the ultimate goal of wanting to go back to school to become a certified emergency medical response technician, an EMT. And upon working with us through SITE as the job entry retention support specialist, we were able to work out a budget. Within 3 months, he was at his own home, completely paying for it, sustaining himself, excelling within his workforce.
Yeah.
And then we got him over to our connections with Morehead State University Adult Education, and they helped him get enrolled for Maysville Community and Technical College to the EMT certification program, and he is almost ready to graduate that program and is actually doing his hours that he has to put in as before he graduates that program. So, I mean, he's doing amazing work and has done nothing but grow since we started working with him.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
That is a pretty good look at what this program is all about. So now I just want to remind us to zoom all the way out and remember who is funding this project of theirs. It's the Department of Justice and the Department of Corrections. I just think it is so interesting and telling of how important career opportunities are for people that the Department of Corrections and Criminal Justice at a federal level is concerned with Eastern Kentucky's job access. This just shows you how important it is to have this access to an actual career opportunity. It's so important even that the federal government pays people like EKCEP to find good jobs for people and help connect people to these good jobs. And yeah, the job is only a part of it, but it's a big part of it. Think about how much time you spend in a given day with work. It is taking everything in me to not go on just a very long rant about all of this. But keep in mind how much this plays back into the big picture. But at the root of it is the one person who you are trying to help get into that perfect job for them.
What we're doing is so needed. And I feel like the way we're doing it is the right way. You know, you hate to say that about you don't want to like brag. I don't want to sit here and brag about our own program, but you know, we're not enough. They don't have to call and say, hey, I need to see somebody about help getting a job. And then we don't say, well, okay, we'll put you on the schedule for March 1st. You come here to the office and, you know, we'll meet with you. Because let's be honest, a lot of our clients, the one, they can't wait that long. Mm-hmm. Two, they can't get to the office. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just, so what we do is, you know, we do whatever works for them. If they're in a recovery center, we go to the recovery center. If they're in transitional housing, we go to transitional housing. We'll meet them at a restaurant. We'll meet them at the park. You know, they can come to us if they want. You know, it's all, everything that we do is so centered around that client and that client's need and where they are, you know, and having heartfelt heartfelt desire to help see every one of these people succeed. I think it's like, even though we have huge numbers, they're not just numbers. Would you all agree? It's like I see so many. There's a lot of money circulating out there to help it. When I first took this job and I was sitting in a partners meeting with all the local partners and everybody was talking about what they could do, I sit there and I thought, wow, how is anybody struggling? If you can do that, and you can do that, and you can do that, and you can do that, why do we have people that don't have? Why is anybody? There's no reason everybody shouldn't be able to go back to school, because there's like 10 people in this room could help people go back to school. And it's because we have it, but we don't always know how to get it to people in the right way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So that has been a goal of mine with this program. Trying to manage this program was making it, user friendly for the people who truly need us, and not user friendly for us.
Yeah.
I'm going to use an example. When COVID hit, and I'm going to be quiet, when COVID hit, they shut down all the career centers. So, they shut down all the places where you could go to get unemployment help, or to get help with your electric, or to get help. All these places were just shut down. The buildings were locked. You had nowhere to go. So our clients needed us worse. Mm-hmm. So, our buildings shut down too. But what we would do is we would go to a picnic table. We'd meet somewhere outside, and them sit on one side and us sit on the other. We all wear masks, and you bring a separate pen, and you still let them sign their paper. We continued to do the work that they needed. And our numbers increased when everybody else's numbers were like, were decreasing because they couldn't have access to people. And I think when we saw how effective we could be working in that manner, we continue to work in that manner. We do whatever is best, is for our clients, for our individuals, and we go and do where they need us to be.
And that is on the front end to start this process, and then they continue it throughout the whole process.
We continue the work. It's not about getting a job or getting them a gas card or getting them, their transmission for their car. It's about, okay, we've got this, we've got this job, we've got you this gas card, you're able to get your first check in. Then it's about, let's budget. What do we need further than that? It's like this continuation 3 years later. Where are these people now? And that they still actually have contact with us. That's what's amazing. That after 3 years that we can still have contact with people that we've worked with.
Yeah.
Especially in this population.
Yeah.
So.
On that note, use the program, people. Tell them people need to do this. It's available. Anybody can go back to school, right?
Absolutely.
Anybody can get the job. Well, the people are here to help you out. Let's help people find this thing. All right? I think we're good. Yeah?
Cool.
Good.
Well, thank you all for tuning in to this episode of The Local Lens. I feel like we only scratched the surface at getting at how important this is. We're going to have all kinds of contact information in the bio of this episode, so if you're interested in using EKCEP or the psych program at all, then I definitely encourage you to reach out to them. They're super friendly people. It's easy to get in contact. They want to help you. Well, I'd like to give a big thanks to our guests, Tessa, Barbara, and Brittany, for coming on to The Local Lens and sharing all of their knowledge with us and telling us about what they do. This is The Local Lens. These are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.